Today we've got a crazy nuclear revenge of ruining somebody's exams. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, my girlfriend tried to mess with my best friend. I'll be honest with you, I've never been a mean person. I'm the guy who offered the bully who pushed me off the swing when I was 6 half of my sandwich. He said he was hungry and I gave it to him. Then he'd apologized for pushing me off the swing. His name was Albert, I still remember. I didn't see Albert after that day, but I remember him. I always try to be nice. I love being the good guy, it actually makes me happy. My mom once had told me that perhaps I was obsessed with getting people's approval. Maybe she was right, I don't know. What I do know is that no matter where I am or what I'm doing, I always try to be fair to everyone. Being a nice person does come with its drawbacks. The most obvious one is that people tend to use me a lot. I figured that out early. I had a lot of what I thought were friends, but the majority of them were just close to me because they thought they could get something from me or something. At first, I hurt a lot. I kept getting my heart broken over and over. Eventually, though, I learned to filter who I let get close to me. It was hard to figure out sometimes, and many people are really good at pretending, but I figured out ways to know if someone was genuine or not, and then I started to cut off people who were only trying to get close to me to use me. I remained friendly to everyone, but now I only had just a few friends. Of those few friends, one of them was Jackson. Jackson was perhaps my first ever real friend. In fact, he remains my best friend. Jackson is a pretty tough person. He was the one who kept me from getting bullied by preemptively bullying the bullies. Though it was a little frightening seeing him lock Victor McConnelly up in his own locker, he was always there to stick up for me, especially when I messed up. He was a true friend. I remember one time when my parents left me at home for a trip. At first, they had wanted to drop me off at my grandparents', but I told them that I didn't want them to. I was 15 and felt confident enough that I could survive 2 days of them not being at home without burning the house down. At first they were skeptical, but eventually they decided that perhaps this was a chance to prove to them that I was mature enough to be independent. They didn't know it at the time, but we all made bad decisions that day. The first 24 hours went well enough. I went to school, I got back, I did my homework, cooked, ate, played video games for a few hours. However, I got what seemed to be a pretty idea all of a sudden. What if Jackson came to spend the night over at my place? We could have the ultimate sleepover without the supervision of my parents. The next day was a Friday, so we wouldn't have to worry about school and we could stay up all night playing games. By Saturday evening when my parents got back, Jackson would be gone. It seemed like a pretty good idea, and so I called my parents to pitch it to them. Again, they weren't really sold on it, but after another round of convincing, my parents agreed to let Jackson come over, but only if his parents approved. His parents approved, and so after school the next day, Jackson followed me home. He had packed a change of clothes and an extra gamepad. At first, it had been a lot of fun. We had talked about all sorts. Then we, instead of cooking, ordered pizza for supper. The night was going great, and we were ready to be up all night playing. But then by 12 a.m. we had already slept off. We were woken up around 1 a.m. to the sound of the fire alarm going off. I didn't know it at the time, but it turns out I had mistakenly spilled water on an open wiring, and now the room was starting to burn. Panicking, Jackson and I left the room and called 911. Then I called my parents to let them know what was going on. They were really worried and said they'd be on their way back immediately. I was so worried that I'd be in trouble. The fire team got there and doused the flames. Thankfully, only my room had been affected by the fire. It had gutted the room almost completely, but at least the rest of the house was still okay and it hadn't affected it structurally. It was one of the firefighters who had identified that the fire was a result of an electrical malfunction. She had seen the burnt cap beside it and put 2 and 2 together. Jackson's dad came over to pick us up. He told us my parents were already at the airport. When we got to Jackson's, his parents had, after confirming that we were absolutely fine, asked us what had happened. I figured the firefighters had told him what they discovered, so I knew that I was the one who had brought that cup into the room. I knew I was the one responsible for that fire. However, before I could speak, Jackson spoke up and said that he was the one who had mistakenly started the fire. Shocked, I looked at him, wondering why he would try to take the fall for me. It made no logical sense. If anything, he was making things worse. Sure, he was trying to get me out of trouble, but then he was putting himself in trouble. What if my parents got mad and said we shouldn't see anymore? What if his parents got mad and sent him to military school or something? As I tried to speak up and say that it wasn't true, he nudged my leg, signaling that I keep quiet. It was hard, but I kept quiet. Later that morning, my parents came over. Their worry was very obvious. Jackson's parents sent us upstairs so they could talk to them privately. They apparently discussed the fact that their son had been responsible for the fire and asked to pay for the repair of my room. My parents had kindly declined, not just because we had fire insurance on the house, but because they were friends. I would later learn that upon hearing all Jackson's parents had said, my dad had simply replied, "Mistakes happen." After the fire incident, Jackson and I became even closer. Something about him risking getting in trouble for me unasked made me feel really proud of him. I would go to the ends of the earth for him. For the rest of high school, we were inseparable and we did just about everything together. We planned that we'd go to the same college and live in the same town and all that. Unfortunately, our plans seemed to be utterly disrupted in our final year of college. We had both planned to school at NYU, but unfortunately, while I got in, Jackson didn't. That was a big bummer. I told him that I'd go to one of our backup schools, but he convinced me to go ahead without him. He was considering taking a gap year anyway. That fall, for the first time since I was 10, I was separated from my best friend. My time at NYU was pretty pleasant. I enjoyed my classes, made new friends, and developed a pretty okay social life. Also, this was New York, one of the biggest cities in the world. There were opportunities just about everywhere and a ton of things to experience. Did you know that if you ate at a new restaurant in New York every single day, it'll take you over 60 years to try them all out? That's crazy. College was also where I finally started to date. I dated a handful of women, but nothing really went long term. By the time I graduated with my degree in economics, I was a completely different person from the version of me who would come in. One thing didn't change though, was my relationship with Jackson. He remained my best friend, and I usually planned my visits home to coincide with when he'd be around. We'd also regularly spoke on the phone and gave each other updates on how our lives were going. After I graduated college, I stayed in New York and started my career working for a brokerage on Wall Street. Work was hectic, but the pay was good. Life carried on. One day, I got a call from Jackson. He had gotten transferred from his company and was moving to New York. I was extremely excited. I was glad that I'd finally be able to be with my best friend once again. I offered to have him stay with me at my apartment, at least for a while. It would not only save us both costs, I don't know if you've heard, but living in New York is obscenely expensive, but it'll also give us time to hang out with each other once again, just like the old times. He agreed, and so we became roommates. It was like we had never left each other. Jackson was as good a roommate as he was a friend. He was reliable, and we never really had issues. Then came Danielle. I had met Danielle through a friend. She was a manager at a luxury clothing store. I liked her almost immediately, so I asked her out. It took a while, but she finally agreed to date me. Danielle was sweet and goofy sometimes, but sometimes she was withdrawn and not wanting to talk to me for days. It had been a huge deal and we had fought about it a few times, but she eventually had become more open to me, and I learned how to gauge her moods and act accordingly. Danielle and I had been dating for just a couple of months, but she had already started talking about moving in together. I had explained that I had a roommate at the time, and I didn't think that would change anytime soon. But she had been insistent. The whole thing had even caused her to dislike Jackson, even though he had never really done anything to her, and they had only met a few times. She always tried to change the subject whenever I talked about him, and she intentionally tried to make plans that clashed with the plans I made with him. It was a bit annoying really, but I figured she'd come around eventually. There was no reason they couldn't learn to at least tolerate each other. One day, I was out getting groceries in my dry cleaning when Danielle informed me that she was at my place. Jackson was in, so I told her he'd let her in. After running my errands, I came home to find that she and Jackson were nowhere to be found. Confused, I called her. When she didn't pick up, I called Jackson. Jackson told me he was at our favorite drinking hole and that I should come over immediately as he had something important he wanted to discuss with me. When I got there, he sat me down, and after I gulped a considerable amount of bottle of the beer that he had gotten me, he finally talked. Danielle had made a move on him. At first I thought he was joking, but he was dead serious. Apparently it wasn't the first time. She had been trying to seduce him since the day she met him, and he had been very carefully avoiding her. He didn't want to start a big fight, and he figured if he ignored her long enough, she'd give up. However, that afternoon, she walked into my apartment unclothed and told him that she was only dating me for benefits and was only interested in him. He had told her off and left the apartment. It was a lot to take in. A lot. I left the bar and went to take a very long walk. I thought about a lot. I considered that perhaps Jackson was lying. Perhaps she had thought that he was me when she walked in. Maybe he wanted her to seduce him so much that he thought she did. After hours of thinking, I called Danielle again. She picked this time. After a brief silence where neither of us spoke, she said finally, "It's true, okay? What do you want me to say?" I asked if there was anyone else, someone she actually went through with. She said yes. I hung up. For weeks, I mourned Danielle. It hurt a lot. I had actually liked her a lot. Her sudden withdrawal started to make a lot of sense suddenly. By the time I was done mourning, my pain had turned to anger. I had to get my revenge. I figured out how to get back at her job. Danielle was targeting a promotion to regional manager at work. She wanted it really badly. In fact, when we had been together, she had talked about it all the time. She had also made the mistake of logging into her email on my computer previously. She had not logged out and she hadn't blocked access to her account on my device. So what did I do? I sent a series of emails to a random address where I mistakenly CC'd her bosses. In the email, I talked about how I was willing to offer bribes to any exec to ensure that I got the role. I also talked about how much power the role will give and how I'd skim just a little over the top of the company's earnings. It didn't take time for the plan to work. Soon, she was investigated by the company. They even audited her branch. Turns out she was stealing from the company, and she got fired and arrested. To be honest, my revenge actually did give me a sense of relief and closure, and it helped me get over her. Jackson and I remain friends till this day. In fact, he ended up finding out about what I'd done to Danielle weeks after she got arrested when I told him. If he was disturbed or upset about it, he didn't show it. He just casually asked if I was going to have the last wing in the bucket of chicken we were eating. Well, obviously the one good takeaway you have from this story is you know that Jackson is a legit ride or die. I mean, I guess you could argue maybe Jackson wasn't into Danielle, but it seems to me that Jackson's a pretty loyal and good best friend. That said, our next story is, girl uses me to get straight A's, so I sabotage her final exams. The one time in my life when I remember being severely hurt was when I was still in the early years of middle school. I was rolling with a crowd of, let's just call them mischievous kids, and they do crazy things around the school and outside. I was usually the one doing the daring stuff, but one day, I was dared myself. One of the boys, Otis, dared me to jump off a building and land on the other building close to it. It wasn't a really tall building, just one story, and they weren't so far apart from each other. On a normal day, I would have cleared that jump with no problem. But that wasn't a normal day. It rained heavily the previous day and most places were still wet, including that rooftop. My footwear also wasn't in the best condition, which completed the recipe for that disaster. I ran at full speed to the edge of the building, slipping slightly as I tried to jump. I fell off that building and landed on my arm, breaking it in the interlocking stone floor. I have to confess, breaking a bone? It hurts like heck. I tried my best not to cry in front of my friends, but as soon as they touched it while trying to lift me to my feet, I couldn't control the tears as they came rushing down my eyes. I say all this to let you understand that I felt one of the worst types of pain imaginable, but it is nothing compared to the pain I felt when I found out that the girl whom I thought was my girlfriend and the love of my life was not really in love with me. She was only pretending because she needed me to help her pass her exams and get straight A's. How did I get myself into a situation like this? Well, it all started in my junior year of high school when I got expelled for playing a prank that seriously hurt a fellow student. We're not going to discuss what the prank is because it has nothing to do with this story. All you should know is that I put my vast knowledge of chemistry to good use, and that jerk deserved it. Anyways, for the rest of the term I was grounded and homeschooled. It was more like I was doing the schooling because I was brilliant, and most of the time I ended up correcting my teacher. This right here is one of the reasons why I frequently got detention in school. Apparently no one likes a smart butt. It didn't really mess with any plans. Because my parents were planning to move during the summer. I was still going to need a new school anyways. I was still grounded during the summer break, and I didn't get to spend any time with my friends. A few weeks into the holidays, my parents and I moved into a bigger apartment in the suburban part of the city. I'm not saying where, sorry, I'm trying to keep this as anonymous as possible. At first, I still wasn't allowed to go out when we got to the new school, but I talked to my parents, and after promising to be on good behavior, they allowed me to go out once in a while, which was still heck for a growing teenager. The new school session started 3 weeks after we moved to the new city. On my first day, I wasn't nervous or anything. I was kind of a nerd, but I didn't have any social anxiety issues. I had no problem making friends. I got to class and dazzled my teachers with my knowledge of the sciences. I quickly noticed something as the weeks went by. Most of the students in the school were average at best when it comes to academic knowledge. Instead, they're well versed in the world of TikTok challenges and Twitter memes. It's a stark contrast to my former school, where at least a higher number of students actually cared about their grades. No wonder the teachers in my new school tolerated my corrections and my know-it-all attitude. I was a breath of fresh air. I joined the school science club so I could feel a little bit of normalcy. I couldn't connect with most of the other students outside the club, so I kinda had no choice. It was a good decision, and I made friends rapidly. One of my best friends to this day, let us call him Jackson, I met him at the science club. After the first term, I kinda soared to the top of the academic rankings. My results surprised even some of the teachers that the school decided to post it on the bulletin board to motivate the other students. At least that's what they said, but to me, I think it's all about wanting to take the credit for grooming an excellent student like me. I became kinda respected by the teachers and simultaneously hated by some jealous students in my class. As if the hate I'm getting from my classmates wasn't enough, something worse happened. Shortly after we resumed after the break, a classmate of mine, Tyler, walked up to me. Tyler was a basketball jock and one of the popular kids in school. He was also a bully that liked to torture other students by taking their lunch money or pushing their heads down the toilet. I had never had an encounter with him before because I was good at blending into the background. But after the spotlight was cast on me, I couldn't avoid him. Tyler walked up to me that fateful day and demanded that I did his assignment for him. Before then, I had never been bullied, and even though I've seen other people being bullied, it has never occurred to me that I'll be a victim one day. I was supposed to be scared and give in to his demands, but I wasn't. I told him no. He was taken aback by my answer, and I went further to explain that I had no problem helping anyone with assignments and stuff, but if he wanted my help, he was going to ask politely. My friends Jackson and some other guys in the science club tried to get me to back down and stop being confrontational, but it was no use. Without a word, Tyler walked away. That was the beginning of my bullying. Every time I walked past the basketball court during gym, he'd throw the ball, aiming for my head. Some other times, he'd accost me in the bathroom and try to drown me in the toilet. Through all these harsh treatments, I still never once agreed to help him with an assignment or a test. Months went by in this manner, and one day I was walking over to my bicycle rack with Jackson when out of nowhere, a basketball landed on my head. I trip on my foot and fall to the ground. The basketball guys laugh in the distance, and before I knew it, a girl from the cheerleading squad came over to help me up. She called the guys jerks and asked if I was okay. It was surprising because as much as I knew, the cheerleaders were even bigger jerks than the jocks. But here this girl was, being all nice. Naturally, I was a bit wary of her. She introduced herself as April. Apparently, we attended lots of classes together. I never noticed because she's not one to interact in class. She asked where I stayed, and when I told her, she asked if she could walk with us. We talked on the way home, and as much as I wanted to be wary of her, I started to let my guard down. She seemed so bright and cheerful. She was a cheerleader. I should have known that the facade of cheerfulness came easy for her. When I got to my place, she asked what I was doing that weekend. This was where all my warning bells were supposed to be going off, but they didn't. I let the fact that she was nice from the beginning cloud my judgment. I told her I was free, and she asked if she could come over to study with me. I said yes immediately. It's not every time a pretty girl asks to come to my house. I know I pay most of my attention to my studies and the occasional mischief, but she was really pretty. I couldn't say no. That Saturday, I was supposed to meet up with Jackson and the rest of the guys for a chemistry experiment, but I had to cancel. Jackson asked why, but I couldn't tell him I was hanging out with April. I just told him that there was an impromptu family meeting and that I had to stay home for it. April came over and we went up to my room to study. My dad made sure I left the door open, and he came by every 10 minutes, offering us hot chocolate or tortilla chips. It was pretty embarrassing, really. One thing that really surprised me is the fact that throughout our time in my house, April paid total attention to her books. I had thought that she was the type that'll be on her phone while I'm explaining the intricacies of organic chemistry, but that wasn't the case. She stuck to her books for the whole day, and it made studying with her very interesting. The next week, during lunch break, I was hanging out with Jackson at the cafeteria when April walked up to us. She joined our table, which was very weird. The cheerleaders and jocks had a different table designated as the popular table. She joined our conversation as though nothing was wrong, but I could feel that Jackson was uncomfortable. By the end of the lunch break, she asked if I was interested in going home together. Obviously, I said yes. We agreed to meet up at the close of the day, and we parted ways to go to our different classes. On the way to AP English class, Jackson asked why I was hanging out with April so much. I answered that she was different from the rest of the cheerleaders. He told me point blank that it wasn't true, and she was only hanging out with me because she needed something from me. I was pretty pissed at him for saying that because it indirectly meant that April couldn't be genuinely attracted to me. I told him he was just jealous that she liked me. Stupidest thing I've done in my life, and I eventually regretted that statement. Jackson said okay, and I should do whatever I liked. But whatever happened, I shouldn't come crying to him. After that day, I started hanging out with Jackson less and hanging out with April more. She seemed really interested in everything I was interested in, especially academics. Most times we hung out at my place or hers, doing assignments and studying for tests. This routine kept up until one day I summoned the courage to ask her to be my girlfriend. Surprisingly, she agreed. The only thing was that she didn't want anyone in school to know that we were dating, so we had to keep our relationship a secret in school. One particular day, we were in her place and she was really worried that she was going to fail a test. I tried to assure her that she was going to do well, but she didn't believe me. She begged me to help her make a note of all the possible questions and answers on a sheet of paper. She wanted to use this paper during the test. I wasn't comfortable with it, but she convinced me to do it. One thing I noticed after April and I started hanging out is that Tyler stopped bothering me. He didn't bully me anymore, and I shrugged it off, thinking it was one of the perks of dating one of the popular kids. I was so wrong. After the time she took the paper into the class for the test, it became a usual thing. I'd help her write down the possible answers. She even started to make excuses to not do assignments and skip our study sessions. "I'm too busy with cheerleading practice," she used to say. It fell on me to help her do her assignments, and anytime I tried to complain, she'd find a way to twist my words and make herself appear as the victim, and I was a fool. I was too blinded to see that she was manipulating me, and I kept doing her assignments for her like a good little soldier. Until one day, my eyes finally opened. It was the close of the school day and I was about to head home. April said she had to stay back in school to practice, so I was supposed to go on without her. But I decided to surprise her. I was going to wait for her all through cheerleading practice, then take her to get some froyo. But as soon as I got outside the gym, I peeked in and noticed that there wasn't any cheerleader in sight, only some jocks, including Tyler. I contemplated leaving and calling to know where April was, but as soon as I pulled out my phone, April walked into the gym room through the other door, and to my utmost shock, she walked over to Tyler and kissed him. Not a peck on the cheek, like an actual kiss on the lips. I've never been more shocked in my entire life. I wanted to storm into the gym and demand answers, but even in my heartbroken state, I knew it wouldn't end well. I stayed there watching in agony as they got all lovey-dovey with each other. Immediately, I understood what Jackson was talking about. April had been using me to get her assignments done. Tyler was probably in on it too. He couldn't get me to do his assignments for him, so he sent her. I left my school immediately and cried when I got to the privacy of my bedroom. I had never had a girlfriend before her, and the pain I felt was unimaginable. I felt so stupid. Of course, Jackson was right. Why on earth would she like me? I stayed away from school for 2 days pretending to be sick. I also avoided her calls because I didn't want to face her yet. Jackson was a really good friend. He came back when I told him what happened, and he helped me come up with a plan to get back at them. Exams were coming up in a few days, and I was sure she was going to want me to help her write down the possible answers like before. I didn't let her suspect that I knew about her and Tyler. When she came over to my place to get the answers, as usual, I told her to write it down herself because I hurt my hand. I merely told her all she needed to write down. I needed the answers to be in her handwriting, so my plan wouldn't backfire. On the day of the exam, I made an anonymous tip to a teacher about seeing April and Tyler get the exam papers from the principal's office. The teacher investigated, and they were searched in the exam hall. They were both found with incriminating papers and were shown out of the exam hall. They were both given failing marks in all of their classes and were given extra years. So by given extra years, I'm assuming that means they failed and had to repeat a year? I mean, I can't really blame OP here. Like, this isn't some extreme backstabbing or like lifelong hurt. I mean, they kind of deserved to get caught for what they were doing. Wouldn't you guys agree? Even if it does mean costing them another go-around in whatever year of school this is? But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.